And what I'm saying is there is a sense of self-sufficiency and self-reliance and self-trust that you build when you are able to be emotionally available just with yourself. Hello, welcome back to my podcast. My name is Arielle, and this is Feeling My Feelings, where I can finally feel my feelings after years of dissociating from them and emotionally abandoning them, after years of not meeting my need to feel them. And also, y'all, this is Feeling My Feelings in Paris. Yay! Yeah, so I am currently on vacation with my family. We are in Paris. Next, we're gonna stop in different places in Spain, and then we're gonna go to Italy, which is gonna be super exciting. I've been eating my weight in gluten-free pastries, which surprisingly seems to be more like there seems to be more of them in Europe than there are in the US. And also in the background, you'll probably hear a lot of sirens and honks because my Airbnb is in a very busy part of Paris. So hopefully that's not too distracting. Hopefully that's charming little, sounds of Paris in the background. And for everyone on video, if you're not, go jump on YouTube real quick and check it out. But here's my Airbnb. Look at these cute French doors. Here's the TV and everything in the background. Chandelier. And look at these kind of like classic, like French apartment style balconies and things. Gorgeous. All right. And I am currently wearing my little polka dotted dress, which might be a little bit too on the nose for, culture. But anyway, today I really want to talk about how to meet your needs, about the consequences of emotional abandonment, and most of all, how to forgive yourself for having the emotional needs that you have. All right, let's get into it. I also feel like I keep needing to whisper because like I'm in an apartment and I feel like everyone's hearing me, but I'm not sure. Okay, but anyway, I have been noticing lately, especially actually since I've been on this trip with my family and my aunt, that I've definitely ignored a lot of my emotional needs because, well, of course, voila, my family has, and generations of my family have. And actually, in general, especially based on the Filipino culture, being Asian, most people in my cultural background, in my cultural background, have ignored their deeper emotional needs because they were never a priority. The priority was you need to make money. Priority was you have to survive. And I've been noticing lately that a lot of our survival mechanisms are born from not meeting some sort of emotional need. Wow. Can you hear that? That's insane. Hold on. It's crazy because I've been finding that I've struggled lately to allow myself to feel confident. And I have been doing a lot of shadow work, a lot of looking into past traumas and healing. And I've felt here and there that, maybe I am going really slow at it. Maybe I'm just getting re-triggered. Why am I still upset? Why don't I want to get out of this stuck place that I'm at? And I think it's really important that I eventually get there, that I get out of the stuck place. But I have been realizing lately that I think at the end of the day, I was not meeting a really important emotional need that I would have to have before I can build real confidence. And that was basically the ability to feel my feelings, hence name of the channel. But specifically feel my feelings about things that have hurt, traumas that I've gone through. I needed to feel sad. I needed to be angry. I needed my body specifically to release all this pent-up tension and stuff and all these limiting beliefs. And I needed to process them, not only mentally, not only being self-aware of them, but my body actually needed to feel it through, let it go, cry it out, scream it out, and essentially grieve it. And I feel like It's really important to be able to be confident and to not be stuck in depression and in those deep wells of feelings for too long where you can't be functional. However, I feel like you do yourself a disservice if you are constantly trying to put on a confident mask and you never fully process things. I mean, that turns into suppressing anger, suppressing sadness, and always putting on a mask instead of allowing yourself the need to express those feelings, even just to yourself. So it's been crazy because, yeah, the past couple months I've been like, oh, okay, I've been unlocking all of these, childhood wounds. I have been understanding how to get out of survival mode. I've been self aware about how much I've been in victim mentality, but it's like I don't want to leave it yet. And for me, obviously, part of that is because you get re-triggered. Part of that is because it's not going to go away that easily. It takes some time. But a lot of it, I think, is because I was still sort of intellectualizing my self-awareness. And I was trying to make it work where, sorry, I'm bringing myself closer here. You're on top of a rice cooker, just so you know. But I was realizing that I was mostly using my mind and my consciousness to feel my feelings when in reality my body needed to process it. And so what's really interesting is that I've seen that this is a main issue when it comes to people living in survival in general. And what I'm saying is there is a sense of self-sufficiency and self-reliance and self-trust that you build when you are able to be emotionally available just with yourself. If you are able to allow yourself to cry, if you're able to allow yourself your anger, and if you feel like you are your own safe space for those feelings, you won't, or at least you're less likely to project and depend on other people to validate those feelings. I mean, the more you don't allow yourself to cry with yourself, that can turn into you depending on emotional security. Like basically on your whoever you're dating, your family members who may have already showed you that they're not emotionally available. You might be relying on everything else outside of you instead of you to feel your feelings, but they can't. You need to. And like what I think is frustrating is a lot of people think that this is too sensitive. Like this isn't a need, that this is just to make you feel better so you can shut up and finally be confident in yourself. No, what I'm trying to say here is that feeling your feelings isn't frivolous. It's not just to make you feel better. Your body, like, your body has to feel and process to let things go. And if you don't do that, you are actually not building your sense of self-sufficiency or self-confidence or self-trust at all. So I think, and I think I'm correct in this, unfortunately, this is what I'm actually confident about, but I think you have to learn how to be present and hold your feelings with you. And I think that has to be a real need. Otherwise, it's gonna disrupt your life. And here are other consequences of not meeting your emotional needs. So if you want to cry, if you want to feel angry that, for example, your parent has put down your career aspirations or whatever, but you decide not to and you mask, what's going to happen? You will suppress the anger that you have towards them. You'll suppress the actual passion that you have for maybe some other career. You're going to end up in a career that you hate. You're going to get burnt out. You're going to get sick. And you won't be meeting your needs. And not only that, you might get burnt out to the point where you quit jobs, where you get fired from jobs, and then you're not financially stable. Or you could be stuck in jobs that you don't like, never wanting to progress, half-assing the work, being underpaid, undervaluing yourself, and then you basically pick up really bad workplace habits, really bad self-esteem, and again, you don't make a lot of money. This is all connected. You have to meet your emotional needs as part of your general foundation for survival. Also, last thing on the whole confidence piece, like I've realized that I'm starting to get annoyed at people who get annoyed at you when you aren't totally confident and healed yet. It's very interesting because there are a lot of different types of friends, life coaches, therapists. There are ones who will be a lot more coachy in terms of being really motivating and pushing you and telling you to cut the crap and to not cry and to just do shit. That's important. But if you're like me, you may have grown up with that like mentality all the time, and you may need something different. You may need more sensitivity and, someone who encourages you to feel your feelings in order to meet your needs and to actually become more confident and self-reliant. But I will say that a lot of people who try to help you end up being annoyed at you for not being confident first. And that is not helping. And I want to make that clear for everyone who does this as well. If you are, okay, let me give you an example. I had a friend who just a couple months ago, she was in a really abusive relationship with her ex-boyfriend. He literally hit her. He also was constantly gaslighting her and cheating on her. And we had another friend who told her, like, I'm not going to be friends with you anymore until you break up with your boyfriend. You need to respect yourself. And that's true, but this is what I'm saying. What I mean, like, you can't yell at someone to be more confident and think that's gonna stick. Because, like, my friend here, like, she was stuck in this abusive relationship because she did not know how to grow her own sense of self esteem yet. Because she was most likely used to being yelled at and thinking that that was okay or whatever. Like, if you come at someone and you're like, you're really stupid for not being confident in yourself, they're just going to take that on as another way that their value is low, or that they're too insecure or whatever. You're not teaching them anything other than to still be motivated by shame in order to be accepted. I don't know. I found that really frustrating. But what I think happens is, again, if you tell someone to just be confident, to just like skip over the actual feeling your feelings and emotional processing part of things, that is still emotionally abandoning yourself. You're still not meeting your emotional needs. You are, again, masking it for someone else's convenience. You're masking it in order to appear more confident. Sure, it's really helpful for you to think about allowing yourself to be the most authentic version of yourself. You get to do that. You get to be confident. And that is what true confidence is. And I think maybe part of the reason why I've had such an issue with confidence is because I think that I was defining it differently and other people were defining it differently as well. Like for me, now I understand true confidence to mean self-trust, self-reliance, self-validation, whereas other people might see confidence as you never show that you're sad. You never show that you're insecure. You never show that you're anxious or anything at all. You're loud, you own things, and nothing's wrong. Like that is not exactly, there's some elements of that though that are confident, but that's not entirely what confidence is. That's not solely what it is. And I find it really frustrating when other people are annoyed that a person is insecure, or that they're annoyed that they don't know how to meet their needs yet. It's kind of privileged to look at a person and be like, you don't know your worth. That's why you get cheated on. It's your fault. Like, yeah, I get that. But let's say, backtrack, my friend came from, I know a lot of people did, but like her parents were divorced, but her dad, extremely verbally abusive. No shit. Of course, she didn't know how to value herself yet or to self validate. And at some point, she needed to learn. I get it. I know we don't have to coddle people, but what I'm saying is you're not gonna yell at a person to heal. They need to process things, they need to feel it in their own bodies, and they need to find the safety within themselves to do it. So let's talk about how to actually move through and grow and evolve by meeting your emotional needs and by healing your traumas. So here's what I have been grappling with lately. And it's this feeling that, as I alluded to before, I I didn't want to be confident yet because I had a lot of sadness and anger to process. So going deeper into that, I realized that in order to meet my emotional needs, it almost felt like I was cutting off and leaving and abandoning some part of my family and my generational line. And it's really frustrating because I'll see, for example, my mom and my sister, they make and made my mom's retired, but they've made a lot of money being registered nurses. You know, they're literally helping people survive all the time. And yet they still have issues actually like spending money and using money in a smart way. They're usually using money to show off or to validate themselves. They themselves, and this is a really important example, since they work in an environment that is literal survival mode, if they paid attention to their actual emotions or to other people's emotions, I think they don't want to be too emotional and to have that show up at work, or else they'd be a mess all the time. So they had to turn it off. But were they able to turn that back on and be more emotionally available outside of work? No. And I've always felt like they took the sacrificial route. Like they decided to sacrifice their emotional needs. They didn't want to pay attention to them. They didn't think it was important. They thought, I'm going to move through life, not just in work, but in every aspect of my life, just going at things, taking action, making a lot of money, kind of living fast and hard, buying big things, showing off, but also being really mama bear to my family, like taking no shit, like being kind of a hard ass, but also being really loud about it. Like, I don't know. And I think that's really admirable. That's really cool. However, with them, I constantly see them dissatisfied. I constantly see them like just basically deciding like people are not good, being in victimhood. Like if they were to face any health problem themselves, because they've seen the worst of the worst, having a job in literal survival mode, they assume the worst. And even actually, both my mom and my sister, when they've had more concerning health problems, they hesitate to see a doctor. Again, they're nurses. They've worked with doctors, but however, they've worked with people and seen them die like regularly. So they don't want to process or feel any fear around that because how are they going to keep up their jobs? And I find that really interesting, and that's why I think it's heroic, it's self-sacrificing, but there's a large part of you, if you are constantly working that way, who you can't have any other emotional need. You can't make time for that. You can't have, you can't break and cry in front of your patient. So it's sad because the way that carries over to the rest of their lives, it's like they built up this sort of hard shield, and it's this like okay, my money and my hard work, like throwing a lot of action at things, being like really, I don't know how else to put it, like being kind of rigid, not rigid, but being very like fast and hard about things, like, oh okay, I'm gonna spend big money on this car, I'm gonna spend big money on this purse, and I'm gonna show it off to everybody. That is where they get their satisfaction. And I think, and you don't, I hope you don't think that I'm stereotyping anything. Like, I think in particular, they are just this way, but there's a way that you can get nice things for yourself without having to rely on it for your self validation. My mom and my sister still do not quite know that way. And the thing is, though, I owe them so much in my life, but at the same time, since they are the ones that are older than me, they were more likely to control me, and they're more likely to make me confused about how I can make money and how I can be self-reliant. And the way that we handle things and our basic foundations have clashed. I would take more time. I would not need to spend so much for validation. And I don't prioritize sort of the material stuff for that to meet the need of feeling validated. But it's very different for them. But I will say, going back to way before what I was what I was going to mention. So it's crazy because I am trying to break away from my mom and my sister's mentality. However, I want to make sure that I still remain respectful of them, and that I know that a lot of what they are doing is sacrificial and it's important, and there needs to be people in the world that operate the way that they do. However, they aren't all ignoring their emotional needs, but somehow my mom and my sister have not figured out how to validate themselves in the way that I feel like I am breaking away and doing so myself. And it's really sad because, yeah, like I am that story where like I'm the person in the family that does the more artistic and creative stuff. And in my opinion, if I had learned to value myself more, and also honestly, if I grew up with more support backing creativity, I would probably not be living in so much survival. I probably would not be devaluing myself and sort of my pricing and stuff. I'd be more confident in my skills and in building my skills. But because all of that was not the foundation that I built for myself or that my family built for me, I'm still struggling financially. However, it actually is the same thing for my sister. Just knowing that even though she makes more money as a nurse, she was telling me today she's having basically the same financial issues as I was having. Like, basically using up all your money on bills, and on bills that built up from, like loan repayments because you needed help with school or with your car or with whatever you needed at the time. And my mom's the same way. She's taken out a lot of loans. She's always looking for more money. She's always kind of being scrappy. And again, I respect their hustle. I respect as much as, they want to have in their lives. However, they're still operating out of survival mode. And it's this weird, jumpy survival mode where it's like, okay, maybe I can't afford to pay for my bill, but I do want to prioritize spending money on this Louis Vuitton bag. Like, it's very confusing. And again, it kind of comes down to they didn't meet the need of like the emotional needs that they needed in order to build more self-trust and self-validation. And a lot of the validation came from what they're going to use their money for, like expensive things and etc. And it was interesting because I was talking to my sister today, and again, I think my mom and my sister, I respect them and everything, but I've been finding that their mentality and perpetuating their mentality is why, I ended up also just financially scraping by. Like my sister was telling me today, she felt bad because she owes people money and she promised them money. And I said, how come, these things weren't planned ahead of time? And I got the sense that she wanted to impress people. She wanted to look it and be acceptable more than she was able to actually like follow through with. And she kept like emotionally eating like really really nice, really good French cheese, and she was like, how do I make myself feel better? And that right there told me, look, I, without her consciously being aware of it, she was basically saying, I wanted validation, so I promised people money even though I did not know how to plan for it. And now I don't want to feel bad about it, and I have to eat or do something externally to not feel bad about it. How come I still feel bad about it? How do I stop feeling bad about it? And I said, I think you need to learn how to, organize and plan and ask for help next time. And my sister goes like, so you don't think I look stupid in front of everyone? And it was just so sad because that's exactly how my mom was growing up. And yeah, again, it makes you think, more money, more problems. Like, it's down to your mentality and how you handle yourself emotionally and how you can rely on yourself. And that is truly how you build the foundation for your real survival, for meeting all of your hierarchy of needs. And I find so my needs right now, and I think what a lot of people, when they haven't found confidence yet, when they are at a point where they're self-aware of their limiting beliefs, of the habits they want to break, I think most of us honestly are pretty aware of what we want to change. We just don't know how to get out of the place of, falling back into patterns. We don't know how to stop finding and being codependent on the same types of people. We still keep perpetuating the same patterns. And I think it's because, like, or at least in my case, I find that it's because I have not grieved and let go of the person that I was, and the person who I needed to be in order to get by. Like, I think, and I tie this back to my sister, my mom, and generations of my family. I think if I were to fully cut off and maybe drastically cut off the person that I was, I would have to say, like, I hate the way my family was. Like, my mom and my sister are stupid, which is something that I was starting to say early on when I was making this podcast. And then I realized there is so much more sadness and grief than there is anger about that, because my generations of my family had to live in survival mode, and they had to live thinking less of themselves. They had to live devaluing themselves. I mean, my mom, because she was taught that it was named this, she still calls the Philippines a third world country. And knowing that they understood that they're less than, like, that mentality sticks with you. Knowing that you come from a culture that was always understood to be less than makes a difference. And this is why I was always pissed off at people who just told you to be confident right away, as if you didn't have years or generations of people who didn't feel less than, or who weren't put down, or who weren't told constantly that they were less valuable. It's very frustrating because you can't just turn on healing and make that switch right away. However, fake it till you make it, like, balance the two. But I think there's a grieving process in letting go of that old identity. For me, it's down to cultural. Like, I know everyone's getting annoyed now of people of color stuff, of activism or whatever, and it being so sensitive, but what has it been, like, only a couple of, not even like a decade or whatever, where, like, we've been in the height of that? Like, most of the time that humans have walked this like, most of the time that humans have gained, like, intelligence and learned stuff, like, we have discriminated against multiple groups of people. And so we've only had the past couple of years where we're starting to speak up for ourselves. And when you start letting go of your old identity, letting go of your old habits, and starting to meet your real needs, it will look like anger. Like, if you have been in an abusive, toxic, gaslighty relationship romantically, eventually a switch will, well, not a switch, like, eventually it'll hit you like, oh, everything that's been happening to me was unfair. And then you get angry because before you were confused, before you were put down, before all you could do was work really hard without getting a lot of validation or love, or, all you could do was expend a lot of energy, not get anything back, and be stuck thinking that that was the only way you could survive in a certain relationship. And then to realize that that was almost a waste of my time, or that my energy, my love was wasted, my sense of self was wasted, that's gonna hit you hard. You're gonna be really angry at first, and you deserve to be, but also because unless you're working with a therapist, which you should be, unless you're really working with someone to balance that out and to process it, all you have is your anger. And then past that, you have a lot of sadness. You have sadness for all the time you spent being that person. Generations of my family, I have sadness for most of their lives where they were taught to think less of themselves. I have a lot of sadness and grief over knowing that if I decide to move on from that mentality, if I can't turn around and help them, which I would like to, but I think a lot of the times you need to focus on you first before you go back and try to help everybody else. But because that is what I'm choosing to do right now, it feels like I don't have, like, it almost feels like I'm emotionally leaving them. Because, and in some twisted way, I am, because previously I was more codependent on them. And they were depending on me to fall into the same patterns and the same mentality as them. So to break away from that, to want more for myself, to feel allowed to cry, as opposed to just kind of throwing hard work at everything with and going fast and hard at things, like it does feel like a slap in the face to generations of people who still didn't understand and couldn't understand their value. I mean, it's really sad, especially if you are the person who is the one that breaks away in your family, that creates the generational wealth, that which is great, and you know that's what your family needs, and you're basically healing your family. However, I'm not quite at the financial abundance part of that. I'm at the changing the emotions and processing the trauma part of it. And so right now, this still seems unbelievable. It seems unsafe to a family that has valued themselves based on breaking their backs, working for people, and trying to impress them with expensive ass shit. And and so it feels like it's both I'm leaving them, and also it keeps being something I'm faced with every day, that they don't understand that, like, whatever my mentality is for meeting my needs. Yeah, so when you are becoming more of yourself, being more authentic, building self-trust, building self-reliance, there's going to be sort of a grieving process of, and that's what ultimately I feel letting go is. It's letting go of the person that you used to be, the person that tried their best, and basically trying not to believe that that person was a waste of time either. Like, that's what's frustrating. And still having love for, the mentalities, the old, like, limiting mentalities of your family or your loved ones. It's very sad to break away from that, because you ultimately have to accept that they're not going with you in some ways, that something in the relationship isn't going to work, that you maybe can't rely on them for everything. I think that's been a hard truth lately for me, knowing that I can't rely on my family to always be the smartest with money, and that at some point I need to allow myself to remember that I'm more balanced. There's a lot of sadness in knowing that they're not going to understand, and that I have to be sort of isolated. But just know that, last note on this, I feel like that process of grief, and I'm talking about basically self grief, but also symbolically sort of letting go of your family, like, or whoever you grew up with that put you in a certain mentality. It's sad, but it will also meet your needs. Like, going back to meeting emotional needs, I felt a lot of tension in my body. I felt like my body almost didn't want to suppress feelings anymore. And so I've been a lot more sensitive lately. And to be honest, I think that's a good thing, because the more sensitive you are, the more honest you are with your feelings, and to be honest, the more likely you're going to speak up for what you actually want. Not all the time though. A lot of the times you might be so sensitive that you're just like, oh my god, this person is hurting me, and you become a victim. But hopefully the more sort of sensitive you are, the more you can channel that into meeting and understanding and being self-aware of your needs and focus on you. So for me right now, like, I felt so tense. I allowed myself to lean into anxiety and anger and sadness, and I didn't censor it, especially for the past couple of years. And I realized, in paying attention to those things, I allow myself to cry and be angry, and to talk to my therapist about things that I was angry about in my past. And when I did that, I started to remember and recognize when people were not treating me right. I was able to recognize when people were toxic. I was able to stop being confused all the time. I think when I was only just like maybe 5 years younger or whatever, like, I would always look for validation. I wouldn't, um, I don't know, understand what I really liked. So unfortunately, I would pretend to like, I don't know, similar musical artists or movies or something to other people. Like, I didn't prioritize what I actually liked. I just prioritized what would help me fit in. I know a lot of people are like, you know, that's typical, but it's very interesting how I now don't feel the need to be validated externally as much anymore. Like now I feel like other things that happened, I developed a lot of health issues, gut issues. My body felt like it was all out of balance, and so I was forced to take care of my body. And it was only when I really had to take care of my body when I that was the only time where I decided to actually take care of myself and pay attention to myself for me and not to impress other people, not to please other people. And I really don't want it to have to come to that, but sometimes it does. Sometimes you can't care about yourself until you hit a rock bottom because you're so used to the same pattern of self sacrifice, like my mom and my sister, because you're so used to the pattern of feeling like you have less value, that someone's going to emotionally abandon you or abandon you in general. So I also think, you know, depending on your personality, you are going to prioritize different needs or different things in your life than others. And I've realized for me, like, I grew up feeling like I wanted to preserve my thoughts and how I felt about things. I didn't always manage the feelings part, but I would often isolate myself. But I'm still right now grateful that I was able to do that, because in doing that, I sort of preserved my ability to listen to myself in certain ways. Of course, it turned into a lot of dissociation and like daydreaming, but I still kept something unique about my own voice and my own perspective alive. And I found that even now, like whenever I get angry, when I'm frustrated with whatever, like dating, work, family, friends, I've learned to at least be by myself, be listening to myself and channeling it into something else. Like for example, this podcast, like I've learned to channel a lot of my frustration and not allow myself. I think this is what I gave myself, which I'm so happy I did, but I did not want to remain confused forever about my needs, and I don't think I was even aware of it then, but it was like my body, myself, I always had this urge to still have the ability to be self-aware and make my own decisions, or at least form my own opinions about things. So I always had this sort of default ability to channel things into extreme self-awareness. So I would journal. And again, right now, I created a podcast in order to talk out like what I'm understanding about myself. So it's really interesting that I still found a way to preserve some of my voice, even though it's still a little confused. But yeah, I'm glad that I gave that to myself. And for my sister, for example, even if she didn't quite understand things mentally or wasn't self-aware, she managed to use just her physical energy to make money. And even though it's kind of confusing for her still, she prioritized moving through life kind of like my mom did, like being social, like being smart, like taking advantage of all the good external things. And so both of us had our ways of meeting some needs, and I think what we need to do is still just balance those out. Yeah, I think it's really cool though, because in some ways you're still obviously meeting your own needs, you're prioritizing different things, but just know that you're allowed to balance and that you can reach balance. So here's some things you can do to meet your needs. First of all, I think we need to learn how to define what our needs are. And again, I kind of want to reiterate that your ability to feel through things is a need. Like physically, if you are sad, like, and you, a lot of us just like, we mostly have valid reasons to be sad. Like if you have broken up with your boyfriend and someone tells you to stop crying, it's like, eventually I need to, but initially I have to cry. Like I need to be sad for a little bit. Like what do you want me to do? Have this go unprocessed? I don't know why people think that emotions are useless. This was built in our bodies for a reason, and I think it was a self-regulating mechanism. Allow yourself space and time to be sad and angry. Because again, the more you deny yourself of that, the more you channel that into some weird, like, external validation seeking habit. So learn to allow yourself your emotions and to trust your emotions with yourself. Another thing is listen to your holistic needs. So, what is your body telling you it needs right now? A lot of the times we think rest is pointless or like frivolous, but rest is literally what helps fuel you to continue to work the next day. It's what helps you heal. It's what helps you recover from sickness. You literally need to rest, or else your body will be overworked. So that's necessary. Is your body telling you that you are anxious around someone? So I think anxiety is a funny one that I think I want to make a separate video about. But whenever someone's anxious, people just want to shut you up right away, and they want to tell you you're stupid for being afraid of something. But in reality, if you're anxious, you basically don't have all the answers to things, and maybe you do just need to learn how to be more calm in those situations. But oftentimes, especially if you're like me and you're used to being in survival mode, you get anxious because you know someone's either gonna abandon you, there won't be enough resources. You get nervous because something is not well prepared, because there isn't a strong foundation or security or safety. So if you are anxious, all you have to do is get to the root of what does not feel safe here and why, and can I prepare anything? What can I do? What is in my control? Allow yourself the ability to look into your feelings and emotions and to ask them what they are for. What do they want to ask? What do they want to teach you? If you are angry, you have the right to be in a lot of situations, and you just need to let that out. In general, to meet your needs, you do have to speak up about them. I think it's really funny that people won't care that much about someone's well-being, except for maybe the bare minimum, until they're really obvious about what they need. Now, this can get pushy, this can get too blunt, this can, obviously we want to say it in the right way, but I've been finding that, yeah, maybe you get a little bit of a badge of honor for being sacrificial and for holding your tongue sometimes or whatever, but ultimately, if you don't meet your own needs, that's gonna turn into some sort of hardship for not only you, but for others. Like, if you had a broken leg, but you're supposed to walk all the way to someone's house to bring them something, it does them a disservice to, lie to them and say that you can make it when halfway you couldn't because your leg is fucking broken. You need to tell them, I need to do something else, I need a car, I need help, whatever. You have to be able to express your needs and to recognize them. You also have to realize that meeting just the bare minimum of everything in any sort of system is never sustainable. Like, for example, if you've ever been at a workplace that's just like, oh, we have just enough money to cover everyone, like their minimum, like their kind of low set salary, we have just enough organizational resources to sort of make it by. Like, those things combined create, first of all, somewhat of a disgruntled employee who feels devalued, and second of all, an employee that probably has now added anxiety, added frustration and confusion and hard communication because of whatever was handed to them. Like, if you meet the bare minimum at within dating, I don't even know what bare minimum is. Like, someone shows up and they're not physically abusive, it's that bare minimum in terms of dating. I mean, even in that, you're always gonna feel dissatisfied and unsafe. Like, something will not feel like it has strong enough security to you when all you're doing is meeting the bare minimum. Plus, if you're just meeting the bare minimum, you're never growing, and you're not going even farther into what your actual purpose is, what your authentic self needs. You see, I'm not even talking about like your sort of like higher sense of self, sense of purpose needs. I'm saying that your emotional needs are part of the foundational needs, or else that turns into survival mode. I think I'm correct about this. And a last thing I'll say and kind of reiterate is that processing trauma, healing from trauma, is not a waste of time. Whatever you had to do before to survive, whoever you were previously, forgive yourself for the mistakes, the perceived mistakes that you made. But you could only have done the best that you could have with the tools and the resources and the support that you had at that time. What's important is that you allow yourself to forgive and accept that person in the whole of who you are, and you give yourself time to come back to you. So I'm really grateful that for the past few years, I've realized that my sort of spiritual awakening, trauma healing journey helped me come back to myself. And in ways that I probably never, I don't think I've really met my full self anyway. Like the way that I grew up thinking like, oh, I have to be in survival mode too, like everyone else in my family. Like, I don't think I ever knew like how I really was. Maybe if I was like up until like 4 or something, but over the past few years, sure, it's been hard because, sorry, I'm looking behind me because it feels like, okay. Anyway, so for the past, I'm gonna record the rest of this way. Okay, it's pretty crazy because for the past couple of years, I have underwent a lot of shadow work, a lot of looking at patterns that I've had that have kept me limited, a lot of looking at what I've done to try to gain validation. I've looked at a lot of codependent tendencies, unhealthy, toxic behaviors, and while that is really hard to face in the moment, now I look back at it and I realize all that looking at myself means I came back to meet and to look at what needs I was suppressing, what emotions I have been suppressing. I came home to myself, and I'm really glad that even though that was tough, even though it was heartbreaking, essentially what I was doing again was going through this long grieving process of the person that I was and who I had to be. And even though people shy away from like having to sit and cry and heal and dig deeper or whatever, like ultimately all of that work is a way for you to come back to yourself. And it has been like a gift, I guess, that I've given to myself, that I am able to look within, that I'm able to learn how to self-soothe now, that I'm able to turn around and help other people do the same. Again, I think it's insane that, like, for example, my sister is making as much money as she is as a nurse, but she still asks me, how do I make myself feel better? Like, it's insane that people can be learning like all these like highly advanced trades and skills and be so celebrated and decorated with success, but they still don't know how to meet their own personal, emotional, basic needs. And I just think, again, you'll find, for me, for some reason, it really is therapeutic to cry. It's therapeutic to allow yourself your feelings. That's the name of my channel. I mean, I'm always so surprised as to like how apt it is, like for everything I'm talking about. But yeah, anyway, let me see if there's anything else I wanted to talk about. Okay, well, that is it. Until next time, peace and love from Paris. Au revoir. Bye bye.